Although we created a very simple application and it has all the components of a model view controller architecture, our app isn't very practical. For one thing, we have a global variable here called scope that is in danger of colliding with any other variables that we create in other places. Plus, all the code is in the same page as our HTML, and that's a little bit messy. So let's go ahead and fix this and talk a little bit about modules. Modules are a way of organizing your code so that instead of writing single huge applications, you split up the work between different sections of your code. Now, this is not really an Angular concept. It's a regular JavaScript concept. What Angular does is make it an integral part of how you do things. If you want to learn more about modules, check out my course, JavaScript Functions. If you look at the documentation for an Angular module, it says that it's a global place for creating, registering, and retrieving different modules. The concept behind modules is that you separate the functionality in your application into different parts. And if we scroll down to the bottom, you can see that the way that you define them is by using this keyword called Angular and then .module and then giving it a name and then some other information. So let's go organize our code in this manner. First, I'm going to create another folder. So in my Angular folder, I'm going to create a new folder and I'll call this JS for JavaScript. And inside that folder, we'll create a controllers document. So I'll select new file and save this as controllers.js. Now, why am I calling it controllers? Remember, controllers is the C in the MVC architecture, and controllers are what binds our models to our views. All right, so now we need to go back into our index page, and let me go ahead and put this onto two side-by-side panels so you can see it a little better. And I'll go ahead and select word wrap here to make all this go in one line whenever necessary. So let's go ahead and move this JavaScript into this new file. And we'll create a link to it right here before the closing head tag. So script, src, and call the JavaScript folder, and then controllers.js. So the goal of creating a module is to separate our functionality, but in order to protect our variables, we're going to have to do something called namespacing. Again, that's not really a Angular concept. It's just a regular JavaScript concept. So what we'll do is we'll create a variable called myNamespace, and we'll set it to this Angular module command. And then we'll give it a name, just like we're supposed to, my app. And then we'll just pass in an empty array because we don't need to pass along any other information. Now that we have our namespace module, we need to link this controller to our namespace. So we'll go ahead and say my namespace.controller. And then we will call this my controller and then pass it along this function that we created earlier. So why did I call this my controller? Remember that in my template, I'm linking to this controller via this ng controller directive. All right, so the only other thing we need to do is make sure that we link our module to our application. Before, when we created the application, we simply called it ng app. But now we need to tie the module to that application. So we'll say equals and then my app, and then I'm going to hit save. And now I'll try to reload this. So it should work exactly like before, but the functionality is a little bit different. We have protected all of our variables by using this namespace. And most of the time, the namespace will be called the same thing as the module, but they're actually doing different things. You're protecting the variables that you're creating into this namespace. But what you'll find is that most of the time, people just use my app as the name of the namespace as well as the name of the module. Organizing our app into modules is the first step towards creating a more realistic application. On a larger application, you would write all kinds of modules that would handle different functionality on the page.